Hyunwoo's mandibles clicked together in a gesture that, among Velkari, expressed deep anxiety, or the holographic display showed the 3 human ships in perfect detail. Jiho studied them carefully, noting their design and construction. They were functional vessels, built for purpose rather than beauty. Their hulls were gray and unmarked except for identification numbers and the flag of Earth. Each ship bristled with weapons, but they were small weapons compared to the massive cannons mounted on the Velkari dreadnoughts that surrounded them. Commander Tajin's voice came through the speakers again, and this time there was irritation in his tone. "Captain Jiwon, you are being irrational. Your position is hopeless. Surrender now and your crews will be treated fairly according to the conventions of warfare." The human captain's response was immediate. "Commander Tajin, let me make something very clear to you. We did not come here to surrender. We did not come here to negotiate. We came here to teach you a lesson about what happens when you detain human merchant vessels without cause. Consider this your education." Jiho felt confused. What was she talking about? He glanced at Elder Mirai, who stood with her arms crossed, her expression unreadable. He wanted to ask what had led to this confrontation, but the recording continued, and he forced himself to pay attention. The Velkari fleet opened fire. Dozens of energy beams and missile volleys launched simultaneously, creating a web of destruction that converged on the 3 human ships from all directions. It was overwhelming firepower, enough to obliterate the small destroyers in seconds. Jiho expected to see the human vessels simply cease to exist, vaporized by the sheer volume of weapons fire. But something impossible happened. The 3 human ships moved. They didn't just move, they scattered in patterns that seemed to defy physics itself. Their engines flared with brightness that hurt to look at, and they accelerated in directions that should have torn them apart from the G-forces alone. One ship dove straight down relative to the orbital plane. Another spun on its axis while accelerating forward, presenting the smallest possible target profile. The third ship, the Indomitable, shot directly toward the nearest Velkari dreadnought, closing the distance at speeds that seemed suicidal. Most of the Velkari weapons fire missed completely. The shots that did connect hit armor that somehow held, at least for a few seconds. The human ships were taking damage, their shields flaring and their hull plating scorching, but they were still fighting, still moving, still alive when they should have been nothing but debris. All ships, concentrated fire on the human vessel designated Defiant, Commander Tajin ordered, his voice showing the first hints of concern. "Bring it down now." The Velkari fleet adjusted its targeting and 20 warships focused their weapons on a single human destroyer. The ship called Defiant took the full force of the assault. Its shields collapsed within seconds. Energy beams cut through its armor like knives through cloth. Explosions rippled across its hull as internal systems failed, and ammunition stores detonated. The ship began to tumble, trailing atmosphere and debris. Jiho felt a moment of relief. Finally, the humans were learning the lesson they needed to learn. One ship was already crippled and the other 2 would soon follow. This would end quickly and perhaps not too many people would die. Then the Defiant stopped tumbling. Its engines, which should have been dead, suddenly fired at full power. The dying ship corrected its trajectory and began accelerating directly toward the Velkari flagship, the massive dreadnought where Commander Tajin commanded the fleet. "What is it doing?" One of the Velkari tactical officers shouted over the communication channel. "Its weapons are offline. Its shields are gone. Why is it still moving?" Captain Jiwon's voice cut through the confusion, and there was something in her tone that made Jiho's skin go cold. It was not anger or fear or desperation. It was satisfaction. "Defiant, we see you. Godspeed and thank you for your service." From the dying destroyer, a new voice responded. It was rough and distorted by static, barely understandable. "It has been an honor, Captain. Tell Earth we made them pay." The Defiant accelerated even harder, pushing its damaged engines beyond any reasonable limit. It was not trying to ram the flagship. It was trying to get as close as possible before doing something else entirely. Jiho watched the distance between the destroyer and the dreadnought shrink. 5 kilometers, 432. Reactor containment failure. A Velkari officer reported, panic clear in his voice. "The human ship's reactor is going critical. They're going to..." The Defiant exploded, but it was not a normal explosion. Not the kind that happened when a ship's power systems failed or its ammunition cooked off. This was a deliberate detonation. a self-destruct sequence that turned the entire destroyer into a massive bomb. The reactor core went supercritical at the exact moment when the ship was closest to the Valkyrie flagship and 4 other cruisers that had moved in to support it. The explosion filled the holographic display with blinding light. When it cleared, the Valkyrie flagship was simply gone, along with 4 cruisers and 2 smaller escort vessels. 7 ships, thousands of crew members erased in an instant by a single human destroyer that had been dying anyway. Jiho sat frozen in his seat, unable to process what he had just witnessed. They had destroyed themselves. The humans had deliberately destroyed their own ship and killed their own crew, just to take enemy vessels with them. What kind of species did that? What kind of military doctrine included suicide attacks as a standard tactical option? The recording continued without pause. The 2 remaining human ships did not stop to mourn their lost comrades. They did not even slow down. Instead, they attacked with even greater ferocity, as if the death of the Defiant had made them angry rather than afraid. Their weapons fire became more precise, more focused. They targeted specific systems on the Valkyrie ships: engines, weapons, command centers. Captain Jiwan's voice came through the speakers again. All remaining Valkyrie vessels, this is your final warning. Withdraw immediately or share the fate of your flagship. We did not want this fight, but now that it's started, we will finish it. Jiho expected the Valkyrie fleet to withdraw. They had already lost 7 ships to an enemy that was supposed to be helpless. Any rational commander would reassess the situation and retreat to a safe distance. But Commander Taijin was dead, killed when the flagship exploded, and the new commander who took over was young and angry, and determined to avenge the fallen. All ships, attack formation Delta 7, the new Valkyrie commander ordered. We will not be intimidated by these creatures. Destroy them both. The remaining Valkyrie ships, 33 warships strong, moved into attack formation. They surrounded the 2 human destroyers and began a coordinated assault. Surely, Jiho thought, surely now the humans would be overwhelmed. 33-2 were impossible odds, even for warriors who seemed to have no fear of death. The human ship called Perseverance took a direct hit to its port side. Armor plating peeled away like paper, exposing the interior compartments to vacuum. Dozens of crew members must have died in that single strike, but instead of trying to protect its damaged section, the ship turned to present its starboard side to the enemy, giving them a fresh target while it continued to fire with every weapon it had. This is Lieutenant Doyen of the Perseverance, a new human voice announced. Captain Jiwan, we've lost power to decks 4 through 7. Engineering reports we can restore function if we reroute life support from those sections. There was a pause and Jiho found himself holding his breath, waiting to hear what Captain Jiwan would say. Surely she would not order her own people to suffocate just to keep the weapons firing. Surely no commander would make that choice. Do it, Captain Jiwan said simply. Reroute everything. Engines and weapons are priority 1. Understood, Captain, Lieutenant Doyen replied, and his voice carried no hesitation, no protest, no fear. Rerouting now. For Earth. For Earth, Captain Jiwan echoed. Jiho felt sick. They were killing themselves. They were deliberately killing their own crew members to maintain combat capability. This was not warfare as he understood it. This was something else entirely, something that violated every principle of civilized conflict. The battle continued, and it became clear that the humans were not trying to win in any conventional sense. They were trying to hurt the Valkyrie as much as possible before they died. Every shot was calculated for maximum damage. Every maneuver was designed to put them in position for the most devastating attack, regardless of the risk to their own ships. The Perseverance lost its main engine. Instead of becoming a helpless target, it used its maneuvering thrusters to spin itself into a weapons platform, rotating to bring its guns to bear on different targets in sequence. It moved like a dancer, graceful and deadly despite being crippled. The Indomitable took so much damage that half of its hull was exposed to space. Fires burned across its surface, visible even in the vacuum because of the oxygen-rich atmosphere that was venting from breached compartments. Captain G1 continued giving orders in that same calm, cold voice, as if her ship was not dying around her. Indomitable to all Valkyrie ships, she said. And now there was something new in her voice. It was not fear or desperation. It was anticipation. You wanted to know what humans are capable of. You're about to find out. The conference room floated in the darkness of space, surrounded by nothing but stars and the vast emptiness between them. Station Meridian 7 had been built specifically for meetings like this, where different species from across the galaxy could gather without favoring any particular home world. The room itself was massive, with seats designed to accommodate beings of all shapes and sizes. Some delegates sat on chairs, others on elevated platforms, and a few floated in specialized gravity fields that kept them comfortable. Jiho walked into the chamber with confidence in every step. He was young for a diplomat, barely past his 30th cycle, and he carried himself like someone who believed the universe would bend to logic and reason. His species, the Velkari, were known for their analytical minds and their tendency to question everything. Jiho embodied these traits perfectly, perhaps too perfectly. His silver skin caught the light from the viewing ports, and his 4 eyes scanned the room, cataloging every delegate present. His mentor, Sunmi, followed close behind. She moved more slowly, more carefully. Her skin had dulled with age. The bright silver of youth faded to a soft gray that spoke of wisdom and experience. She had attended these council meetings for over 40 years, and she knew things that Jiho had only read about in historical documents. Her eyes carried a weight that her student had not yet learned to recognize. "Remember what we discussed," Sunmi said quietly as they approached their designated seats. "Some topics are not open for debate, no matter how outdated they might seem." Jiho waved a hand dismissively. "Everything should be open for debate. That's the foundation of the Galactic Trade Council. We're here to discuss opportunities and remove barriers to commerce. The human ban is the biggest barrier in our sector." Sunmi said nothing, but her expression tightened. She had learned long ago that some lessons could not be taught with words. Some knowledge had to be experienced, and she feared that Jiho was about to receive an education that would change him forever. The council chamber filled with delegates from 12 different species. There were the Korthan, with their multiple limbs and crystalline armor. The Pelzari floated in their containment spheres, their gaseous forms swirling with colors that reflected their moods. The Drenvik sat heavy and solid, their stone-like bodies barely moving as they watched the proceedings with ancient eyes. Each species brought their own perspective, their own history, and their own reasons for being here. At the security station near the entrance stood Hyunwoo. He was Velkari like Jiho and Sunmi, but his body told a different story. Scars covered his arms and chest, visible even through his uniform. One of his eyes had been replaced with a mechanical version that glowed faintly in the dim light. He had served in the Velkari military during what the history books simply called the human conflicts, though most people Jiho's age didn't even know what that meant. The wars had ended before Jiho was born, and they had faded into the background of history like so many other ancient disputes. Hyunwoo watched Jiho with an expression that mixed concern with something that might have been pity. He had heard rumors about what the young diplomat planned to propose today, and he had tried to send warnings through unofficial channels. But Jiho had ignored them, dismissing Hyunwoo as just another scarred veteran clinging to old fears and outdated prejudices. The council session began with routine business. Trade agreements were discussed and approved. Shipping routes were optimized. Minor disputes between merchant guilds were mediated and resolved. Jiho sat through it all with barely concealed impatience, waiting for his chance to speak. He had prepared his presentation carefully, gathering economic data that proved beyond doubt that the human ban was costing the galaxy trillions in lost trade opportunities. Finally, the council chairman indicated that new business could be introduced. Jiho stood immediately, his 4 eyes bright with enthusiasm. "Honored delegates," he began, his voice clear and confident. "I come before you today to discuss an outdated policy that has limited our economic growth for far too long. The ban on human contact and trade was implemented 73 years ago, before most of us in this room were even born. It was a reaction to events that occurred during a more primitive time, when our species were still learning to coexist peacefully." He activated a holographic display that showed trade projections and economic models. The numbers were impressive, showing how much wealth could be generated if Earth was brought into the galactic economy. The human homeworld possessed resources and manufacturing capabilities that could benefit everyone. "The humans have been isolated for over 7 decades, Jiho continued. "Surely that is punishment enough for whatever transgressions occurred in the past. I propose that we establish a diplomatic committee to evaluate the possibility of reopening negotiations with Earth. We could begin with limited trade agreements and expand from there based on successful cooperation. The chamber fell silent. Delegates who had been chatting quietly or reviewing their own data suddenly stopped and turned their full attention to Jiho. The silence was not the thoughtful quiet of consideration. It was the shocked silence of disbelief, the kind that falls when someone says something so profoundly ignorant that no one quite knows how to respond. Sunmi closed her eyes and lowered her head. She had hoped that Jiho would listen to her warnings, that he would at least moderate his proposal or present it more carefully, but he had charged forward with all the confidence of youth and none of the wisdom of experience. From her seat at the head of the council table, Elder Mirai slowly rose to her feet. She was old even by Velkari standards. Her skin nearly white with age, her movements slow and deliberate. She had been a council member since before the human ban was implemented. She had been there when the decision was made, and she carried memories that still woke her in the night with cold terror. "Young diplomat," she said, her voice thin but steady. "Do you know why the ban was implemented?" Jiho nodded enthusiastically. "Yes, Elder. There were military conflicts between human forces and several alliance members. But those conflicts ended decades ago, and do you know what those conflicts involved?" Mirai interrupted, her voice harder now despite its fragility. "Border disputes, I believe. Territorial disagreements and misunderstandings about trade rights. The sort of conflicts that occur between any species during first contact periods." Jiho spoke with the confidence of someone who had read the official histories and believed he understood them. Mirai reached into her robes and produced a small data chip. It was old, the kind of storage device that hadn't been commonly used for 30 years. She held it up so that everyone in the chamber could see it. "This," she said quietly, "contains the real reason for the ban, not the sanitized version in the public histories, not the diplomatic language we use in official documents. The truth." Jiho felt a flutter of uncertainty in his chest, but his pride would not let him back down now. "With respect, Elder, I believe we should make decisions based on current realities, not old grudges and ancient history." Hyunwoo moved from his position at the security station, walking slowly to stand beside Mirai. His mechanical eye focused on Jiho with an intensity that made the young diplomat want to look away, but he forced himself to maintain eye contact. "I served during those conflicts," Hyunwoo said, his voice rough as gravel. "I commanded a destroyer that engaged human forces at the Battle of Tertius 9. I was one of 7 survivors from a crew of 200. He paused, and his real eye seemed to look at something far away, something that Jiho could not see. "I have spent every day since then grateful that the ban exists." Jiho felt his confidence wavering, but he had committed to this course of action. Too many delegates were watching, and he had invested too much political capital in this proposal to retreat now. "I respect your experience, security officer, but surely we cannot make policy based on fear. The humans are just another species. They fought wars, as all species do, but they can also be reasoned with, negotiated with. You truly believe that, don't you?" Mirai's voice was soft, almost sad. "You truly think that humans are just like us? That they fight wars the way we do, for the same reasons and with the same limits?" "Yes," Jiho said firmly. "I believe that all sentient species are fundamentally similar in their desires and their motivations." Mirai looked around the chamber at the other delegates. Many of them were old enough to remember the truth. Even if they had not experienced it directly, some of them nodded slowly, giving their permission for what she was about to do. "Very well," Mirai said. She walked slowly to the council's main display terminal and inserted the data chip. "If you truly wish to understand why we banned contact with humanity, then you shall see. But know this, young diplomat, some knowledge cannot be unlearned. Some truths once witnessed will change you forever." Sunmi reached out and gripped Jiho's arm tightly. "Please," she whispered urgently. "Withdraw your proposal. Trust those of us who know better." You don't need to see this, but Jiho's pride had taken control. He gently removed Sunmi's hand from his arm and stood straight, facing the display screen. "I am not a child to be shielded from uncomfortable truths. If this recording will help me understand the ban, then I welcome the opportunity to learn." The recording showed no mercy because the humans showed no mercy. Jiho watched as escape pod after escape pod was targeted and destroyed. Each small craft held perhaps 5 or 6 Velkari crew members, people who had already surrendered, who posed no threat, who were simply trying to survive. The humans destroyed them anyway with the same cold efficiency they used on everything else. One Velkari captain tried to save his crew by ordering them to power down completely. The escape pods went dark, their engines off, their distress beacons silent. Perhaps, Jiho thought desperately. Perhaps the humans would miss them in the chaos of battle. Perhaps some would survive if they just stayed quiet and still. But the human ships had advanced sensors that could detect life signs even in powered-down pods. They moved through the debris field systematically, scanning for survivors and eliminating them. A human tactical officer's voice came through the recording, calm and professional, as if he was doing routine maintenance rather than hunting down helpless victims. Sector 7 clear. Moving to Sector 8. Multiple life signs detected, engaging. More escape pods died. More Velkari spacers perished in flashes of light that briefly illuminated the darkness before fading into nothing. Jiho felt his hand shaking. He gripped the arms of his chair tightly, trying to maintain some appearance of composure, but inside he was screaming. The Indomitable was dying. Captain G1's ship had taken so much damage that it was barely recognizable as a vessel anymore. Hull sections were missing, torn away by weapons fire. Fires still burned across its hull, consuming the last of the oxygen that leaked from ruptured compartments. The ship was tilting slowly, its gravity systems failing, its power flickering. Indomitable actual to all human vessels, Captain G1 said, and her voice was growing weaker now, strained with pain or lack of oxygen or both. We have maybe 2 minutes of function left. Requesting permission to make our deaths count. Permission granted, Captain, Admiral Minho replied. Choose your target. There was a pause, and Jiho could hear labored breathing over the communication channel. When Captain G1 spoke again, her voice was barely a whisper. The largest one. The Dreadnought at position 47 Mark II. We're going to take it with us. Confirmed. All ships clear the approach corridor. Indomitable is making her final run. The dying human destroyer turned one last time. Its engines, which should have been completely dead, somehow found power for one more burst of acceleration. The ship moved toward a Velkari dreadnought that was trying desperately to retreat, its own engines damaged, its weapons exhausted. The Velkari crew saw the Indomitable coming. They knew what was about to happen. Jiho could hear their screams and pleas over the communication channel, begging for mercy, begging for their lives. The human ship did not slow down. It did not change course. It accelerated harder, pushing its shattered frame toward impact. For Earth, Captain G1 whispered one last time, and then the Indomitable struck the dreadnought at full speed. The explosion was enormous, even larger than the one that had destroyed the Defiant earlier. The dreadnought broke apart like a toy, its massive hull splitting into pieces that tumbled away in all directions. The Indomitable ceased to exist entirely, vaporized in the collision. Both ships, thousands of tons of metal and technology and living beings, became nothing but expanding clouds of debris and radiation. Jiho felt tears on his face and realized he was crying. He was not alone. Several other delegates in the council chamber were openly weeping, and not all of them were species that had fought against humanity. Some were crying simply because they were witnessing something that should never have happened, something that violated fundamental assumptions about how civilized beings conducted warfare. The Perseverance remained. It was the last of the original 3 human ships, and it was the most damaged. Lieutenant Doyon commanded it now, since his captain had died when the sections without life support had been vented. The ship could barely maneuver. Its weapons were down to perhaps 30% effectiveness. By any reasonable standard, it was no longer a threat, but the Perseverance continued fighting. Lieutenant Doyon used what little power remained to position his ship where it could do the most damage. When the main weapons failed completely, he began using the maneuvering thrusters as weapons, pointing the exhaust nozzles at Velkari ships and firing them at full power. The superheated plasma was not as effective as proper weapons, but it could still damage sensors and melt armor at close range. Perseverance, this is Admiral Minho. Your ship is combat ineffective. Withdraw to safe distance and prepare for rescue. Negative, Admiral, Lieutenant Doyon replied, and his voice was steady despite everything. We still have thrusters and we still have target solutions. We can still contribute to the mission. Lieutenant, that is an order. Withdraw now. With respect, Admiral, I cannot comply. My crew voted to continue fighting. Democracy in action, sir. There was a long pause, and then Admiral Minho's voice came back, and there was something in it that might have been pride, or might have been sadness. Understood, Lieutenant? Make it count. Always do, sir. Perseverance out. The crippled destroyer continued its work, using every trick and tactic available to damage the Velkari fleet. When it ran out of ammunition entirely, Lieutenant Doyen began ramming debris into enemy ships, using the maneuvering thrusters to push chunks of destroyed vessels into the path of functioning ones. It was crude and inefficient, but it worked. A piece of hull plating moving at high speed could still punch through shields and damage systems. The fresh human ships from Admiral Minho's fleet did not need any help, but they coordinated with the Perseverance anyway, treating the dying destroyer as an equal partner in the battle. They set up their firing patterns to account for Lieutenant Doyen's position, making sure their weapons fire supported rather than hindered his efforts. The Velkari fleet was down to 15 ships now. 15 out of the original 40, and many of those 15 were heavily damaged. The new Velkari commander had long since stopped trying to fight back. He was simply trying to survive, trying to keep his people alive long enough to escape this nightmare. Human fleet. This is Commander Kubok of the Velkari forces, the officer said, and his voice was breaking with desperation. We surrender unconditionally. We will power down all weapons. We will transmit our full tactical data. We will submit to boarding and detention. Please just stop killing us. Admiral Minho did not respond immediately. The silence stretched out, and Jiho found himself hoping against hope that the humans would show mercy now, that they would accept the surrender and let the survivors live. Surely they had made their point. Surely the message had been delivered clearly enough. Your surrender is noted, Admiral Minho finally said, but not accepted. You see, Commander, we need to make absolutely certain that your people understand what happened here today. We need survivors to tell the story, but not too many survivors. Just enough to spread the word. What are you saying? Commander Kubok asked, though the fear in his voice suggested he already knew. I'm saying that we will let some of you live. Perhaps 1 ship in 4, perhaps 1 in 5. We haven't decided yet. The rest will die. You can choose which ships survive by having them move to coordinates I'm about to transmit. The ships that follow orders quickly will live. The ships that hesitate will die. You have 30 seconds to begin moving. It was cruel in a way that Jiho had never imagined possible. The humans were making the Velkari choose who lived and who died. They were forcing the survivors to watch their comrades die, knowing they had been spared only by chance or quick reflexes. The psychological damage would last forever, ensuring that everyone who survived would never forget, would never stop telling others about what happened when you challenged Earth. The Velkari ships scrambled to obey. Captains shouted coordinates to their helmsmen. Ships with damaged engines pushed them beyond safe limits, trying desperately to reach the designated safe zones before the deadline expired. Some made it. Some did not. When the 30 seconds ended, Admiral Minho gave the order, and the human ships opened fire on everyone who had not reached safety in time. Jiho watched 4 more Velkari ships die, their crews screaming until their communication systems failed or their life support gave out. The ships that had reached the safe zones were forced to watch, unable to help, unable to do anything except witness the execution of their fellow spacers. When it was over, only 11 Velkari ships remained out of the original 40. The space around them was filled with debris and bodies and the expanding clouds of gas that had once been functioning vessels with living crews. The human ships formed a perimeter around the survivors, weapons still active, making it clear that any attempt to flee would result in immediate destruction. Velkari vessels, you will now transmit all data regarding this engagement to your central command, Admiral Minho ordered. You will include full tactical recordings, casualty reports, and a complete accounting of how this battle began. You will explain that you detained human civilians without cause and demanded ransom for their return. You will explain that this is the price of threatening Earth. Do you understand? Yes, Commander Kubok whispered. We understand. Jiho stood slowly from his chair, his legs unsteady beneath him. He walked to the terminal where he had uploaded his proposal and began the process of withdrawing it. His hands shook as he entered the commands, but his mind was clear for the first time since entering the chamber. He had been so confident, so certain that he understood the situation better than those who had lived through it. Now he understood nothing except his own ignorance. Proposal withdrawn, he said quietly, his voice barely carrying across the chamber. I apologize to the council for wasting your time with my foolishness. Elder Mireille shook her head gently. It was not a waste, young diplomat. Every generation must learn these lessons. Some learn from the words of their elders. Others must see the evidence for themselves. You are not the first to question the ban, and you will not be the last. What matters is that you understand now. The other council members began to gather their materials and prepare to leave. The session was effectively over, though technically it would remain open for another hour in case anyone had additional business to present. No one did. The weight of what they had witnessed hung over everyone like a heavy blanket, making normal business impossible. Yunwu approached Jiho as the young diplomat stood by the terminal. Still staring at the screen that confirmed his proposal's withdrawal, the security officer's mechanical eye dimmed slightly, a gesture of sympathy among Velkari who had lost body parts in combat. I know what you are feeling, Yunwu said quietly. I felt it too when I first understood what humans were capable of. The shame of having survived when so many others died. The confusion about how beings that seem so similar to us can be so fundamentally different. The fear that maybe we are the ones who are wrong. That maybe their way of thinking makes more sense than ours. Jiho looked at him with two of his eyes while the other two remained fixed on the screen. How do you live with it, knowing that they exist out there, that they could come back at any time if someone makes a mistake? I live with it by respecting the ban, Yunwu replied. By making sure that everyone who serves under me understands why the rules exist. By treating every report of possible human contact with absolute seriousness. By remembering that the ban protects both sides, not just us. Sunmi joined them, her expression sad but understanding. She had known this moment would come. Had known that Jiho would need time to process what he had learned. You were not wrong to question, she told her student. Questioning is how we grow and learn. But some questions have answers that we wish we did not need to know. I saw the casualty numbers, Jiho said, his voice hollow. Thousands of Velkari dead in that one battle. Thousands more in the other engagements. And for what? Because we detained some merchants? Because we demanded payment for passage through disputed space? These are normal things. These are things that happen every day between species. But not with humans. Sunmi reminded him gently. That is what you must remember. The rules that apply to the rest of us do not apply to them. Not because they think they are special, but because they genuinely see the world differently. To us, detaining ships is a legal process. To them, it is kidnapping. To us, demanding payment is negotiation. To them, it is extortion. We use the same words but mean completely different things. Counselor Yuna approached their group, her stone features unreadable but her voice kind. I have something that might help you understand, young Jiho. Something that was not included in the official histories but that I think is important. She activated a small personal display and showed him a document. It was a letter written by Ambassador So-young, the human diplomat who had proposed the ban. The letter had been sent to Elder Mireille privately, not part of any official communication. Jiho read it slowly, absorbing every word. The ambassador wrote about her own people with a mixture of pride and sorrow. She explained that humans had evolved on a world that tried to kill them constantly. Predators, diseases, weather, other humans. Everything was a threat, and only the most aggressive survivors passed on their genes. This created a species that saw threats everywhere and responded to them with overwhelming force. The letter continued. Ambassador So-young wrote that humans had recognized this about themselves only after they reached the stars and began meeting other species. They had expected everyone to think like them, to respond to threats the same way. When they discovered that other species could resolve conflicts without total war, that surrender was not seen as ultimate shame, that prisoners could be taken and later released without dishonor, humans realized they were the anomaly. We are the dangerous ones, the ambassador had written. We are the species that other civilizations should fear, not because we are evil, but because we cannot help what we are. We have tried to change. We have studied your ways and attempted to adopt your customs. But when the moment comes when our people are threatened, we revert to what evolution made us. We become the predators that our ancestors had to be to survive. And in space with weapons that can destroy worlds that makes us too dangerous to be allowed free among you. The letter ended with a paragraph that made Jiho's hearts ache. Please understand that we propose this ban not as punishment but as kindness. We are asking you to help us protect you from ourselves. Keep your people away from ours, and we will keep our people away from yours. Let our children grow up never knowing the horror of what we can do to each other. Perhaps in a few more generations we will have evolved past our violent nature. Perhaps someday humans will be ready to join the galactic community as true equals. But that day is not today, and forcing it to come sooner will only result in more death. Please, for both our sakes, accept the ban. Jiho finished reading and stood in silence for a long moment. The letter changed everything. It was not a story of monsters who enjoyed violence. It was a story of people who recognized their own dangerous nature and chose isolation to protect others. That somehow made it even more tragic. She died, you know, Elder Mirai said softly. Ambassador Soyoung. She returned to Earth after the ban was implemented and retired from diplomatic service. We heard later that she spent her final years working with human children, trying to teach them peaceful conflict resolution, trying to create a generation that would not need the ban. I do not know if she succeeded. Trade Minister Junho, who had been silent throughout the entire session, finally spoke. His species, the Ralvani, were known for their merchant skills and their ability to find profit in any situation. I have encountered human traders at the border stations, he said. 3 times in my career I have negotiated with human merchants who came to the designated contact zones. Everyone turned to look at him. Contact with humans, even authorized contact, was rare enough to be noteworthy. Yunyo continued, his whiskers twitching with remembered nervousness. They were polite, professional. They offered fair prices and good quality merchandise. They smiled and joked and seemed like any other traders I have dealt with. I would have thought them perfectly normal if I did not know what they were. But you did know, Kangmin observed, his gaseous form swirling with curiosity. How did that affect the negotiations? I was terrified the entire time, Junho admitted. I kept thinking about the recordings, about what would happen if I offended them accidentally. If I offered too low a price, would they see it as an insult? If I questioned the quality of their goods, would they consider it an attack on their honor? Every word I spoke, every gesture I made, I calculated to avoid triggering their violence. And did they notice your fear? Yuna asked. Junho nodded slowly. Yes. One of the human merchants, a woman named Yunji, asked me directly why I seemed so nervous. I did not know how to answer without insulting her, so I told the truth. I said that I had seen the historical records and that I was afraid of making a mistake that would anger her people. How did she respond? Jiho asked, genuinely curious. She looked sad. Junho replied. She said, "We are not animals. We do not attack people for offering a fair bargain or asking reasonable questions. We only become dangerous when someone threatens our people or tries to cheat us maliciously. Trade honestly with us and you have nothing to fear." Then she reduced her asking price by 10% to show good faith. The negotiations concluded successfully and no one was harmed. This proves they can be reasonable, Jiho said, grasping at the hope that perhaps contact was not as dangerous as everyone believed. It proves they can be reasonable when they choose to be, Hyunwoo corrected. But the key word is choice. When humans decide they are in a peaceful situation, they behave peacefully. When they decide they are in a hostile situation, they behave with total violence. The problem is that we cannot always predict what will trigger the change from one to the other. Something that seems minor to us might seem like a major threat to them. And once the change happens, there is no going back. No negotiation, no mercy until they believe the threat has been eliminated. Sunmi added another perspective. There is also the question of what the isolation has done to them. 73 years is not a long time for a species, but it is long enough to change a culture. We know very little about what human society looks like now. Do they still teach their children about the wars? Good. You will also delete all navigational data regarding Earth's location from your databases. You will delete all info. The recording ended. The holographic display faded to darkness and the lights in the council chamber slowly returned to normal brightness. But nothing felt normal anymore. Jiho sat motionless in his chair, his 4 eyes staring at the empty space where the display had been. His mind kept replaying what he had seen, unable to fully accept that it was real, that intelligent beings actually fought that way. The silence in the chamber was complete. No one spoke. No one moved. Even the delegates who had not watched the recording before, who had only heard stories about human warfare, sat in stunned disbelief. The reality was so much worse than any description could capture. Words failed to convey the absolute ruthlessness, the calculated cruelty, the willingness to die if it meant hurting the enemy. Elder Mirai finally broke the silence. Her voice was soft and tired, carrying the weight of decades of nightmares. That battle took place 73 years ago. It was not the first engagement between humans and the Galactic Alliance, and it was not the last. But it was typical. Every encounter with human military forces followed the same pattern. Overwhelming human casualties. Even more overwhelming enemy casualties. Victory achieved not through superior technology or numbers, but through absolute refusal to accept defeat. She walked slowly back to her seat, moving like someone much older than she appeared. The Battle of Kronos Rift began, as Admiral Minho stated, because Velkari forces detained 3 human merchant ships. The merchants were traveling through what the Velkari claimed was restricted space. The humans claimed it was open territory according to the original treaty boundaries. It was a minor dispute, the kind that happens constantly in any civilization. Sunmi spoke up, her voice heavy with emotion. The Velkari captain who detained the merchants treated them well. They were given comfortable quarters. They were fed. They were not harmed. The Velkari simply wanted to hold them until the territorial dispute could be resolved through proper diplomatic channels. It should have taken perhaps a week, maybe 2 at most. But humans do not think like we do, Hyunwoo added, his mechanical eye still focused on Jiho. To us, detaining ships in disputed territory is a legal matter. To them it was an act of war. They do not see degrees of offense. They see only insult and response. And their response is always the same. Total, overwhelming, disproportionate violence. Jiho found his voice finally, though it came out as barely more than a whisper. But why? Why would they sacrifice so much for so little? 3 merchant ships, 3 crews. Surely that was not worth the deaths of hundreds, thousands of their own people. Elder Mirai looked at him with something like pity. That is exactly what we asked after every battle. We could not understand their logic. We detained a few ships, they destroyed entire fleets. We issued demands, they responded with extinction-level force. Nothing we did seemed proportional to their response. We thought they were simply insane, that their species had some genetic flaw that made them incapable of rational decision-making. She paused and activated another display, this one showing casualty statistics from dozens of battles. The numbers were staggering. In every engagement, human losses were high, sometimes extremely high, but enemy losses were always catastrophically higher. We killed humans in great numbers. In some battles, we achieved kill ratios of 10 to 1 in our favor. We destroyed more of their ships. We killed more of their people. By any conventional military standard, we were winning. But we were not winning, Hyunwoo said quietly. Because humans do not measure victory the way we do. They do not count losses. They do not calculate cost versus benefit. They measure victory by whether their enemy still wants to fight. And after every battle, we wanted to fight less. After every engagement, we were more afraid. After every encounter, we were more willing to avoid them entirely. Counselor Yuna spoke for the first time since the recording had played. She was a Drenvik, one of the stone-skinned species known for their patience and long memory. I was not alive during the human conflicts, but I have studied them extensively. There are 17 recorded major battles between human forces and various alliance members. 17 separate incidents, each triggered by what humans perceived as aggression or disrespect. Do you know how many different species fought against humanity during those conflicts? Jiho shook his head mutely. 17, Yuna continued. 17 different species, each thinking they could succeed where others had failed. Each believing that their technology or their numbers or their tactical brilliance would make the difference. Each learning the same terrible lesson. Humans do not lose because they refuse to accept loss as a possibility. They will die to their last soldier rather than surrender. They will destroy their own ships rather than let them be captured. They will sacrifice everything they have to hurt you, because to them, the principle matters more than survival. Another delegate, a Pelzari named Kang Min, whose gaseous form swirled with dark colors, added his perspective. My people fought humans at the Battle of Tertius 9, the same battle where security officer Hyunwoo served. We outnumbered them 8 to 1. We had better ships, better weapons, better positions. We should have won easily. Instead, we lost 70% of our fleet. The humans lost 90% of theirs, but they considered it a victory because we retreated and they did not. Hyunwoo nodded slowly. I watched humans board disabled Pelzari vessels not to take prisoners, but to ensure no one could salvage the ships later. They planted explosives throughout the hulls and destroyed them, even though the vessels could have been captured intact. When I asked a human prisoner why they did this, he looked at me with confusion and said, "Because they're enemy ships. Why would we let anyone use them?" As if the answer was obvious. Jiho felt like he was drowning in information that contradicted everything he thought he knew about warfare and civilization. But surely humans can be reasoned with. Surely they understand negotiation and compromise. They must have diplomatic channels, treaties, trade agreements. Oh, they do, Elder Mirai assured him. Humans are perfectly capable of diplomacy when they choose to engage in it. They honor their treaties meticulously. They trade fairly and honestly. Human merchants are known throughout the sectors they operate in as reliable and trustworthy partners. I have met human diplomats who were charming, intelligent, and entirely reasonable. Then I do not understand, Jiho said, frustration mixing with his confusion. If they can be reasonable, why do they fight like that? Why such violence when diplomacy is an option? Sunmi reached out and placed her hand on his arm gently. Because to humans there is a clear line between peace and war and nothing in between. When they are at peace, they are genuinely peaceful. They will negotiate, compromise, accept losses, work toward mutual benefit. But when that line is crossed, when they perceive themselves to be at war, they become something else entirely. And the line is crossed very easily in their minds. What triggers it? Jiho asked. What makes them decide they are at war instead of just having a dispute? Threat to their people, Hyunwoo answered immediately. That is the only rule that matters to humans. Threaten their civilians, detain their merchants, attack their colonies, and they consider it war. It does not matter if you meant it as a minor action or a negotiating tactic. It does not matter if you planned to release everyone unharmed. The moment you touch their people, you are their enemy, and they will destroy you. Elder Mirai brought up another display, this one showing a timeline of events leading to the galactic ban on human contact. After the first few battles, we began to understand the pattern. We issued warnings to all member species. Do not engage with humans unless absolutely necessary. Do not detain their ships. Do not restrict their movements in open space. Give them what they want and let them leave peacefully. For a while, this worked. Conflicts decreased. We thought we had found a solution. But then the Korthan Dominion decided to test the boundaries, Kangmin said, his form darkening further with the memory. They believed the humans were bluffing, that their reputation was exaggerated. The Korthan captured a human science vessel that was studying a nebula in disputed space. They held the crew for ransom, demanding payment for their release. The humans paid the ransom immediately, Yuna added. They transferred the requested funds within hours. The Korthan released the science crew unharmed. Everyone thought the incident was resolved. The Korthan believed they had found a way to profit from human presence without triggering their violent response. Elder Mirai's expression was grim. 3 weeks later, a human battle fleet arrived at the Korthan home system. Not at a colony, not at a military outpost, at their actual homeworld where billions of civilians lived. The humans did not attack immediately. Instead, they broadcast a message that was heard across the entire planet. She played an audio recording. A human voice, male and calm, spoke in perfect Korthan language. This is Admiral Taeyang of the Earth Fleet. 3 weeks ago, your government kidnapped human civilians and demanded ransom for their safe return. We paid your ransom because the lives of our people matter more than money or pride. But payment does not equal forgiveness. You took our people.